Think about a world where languages that we speak are owned by companies. So in order to speak a language, you have to pay a license. ISA is a language that the computer speaks. The idea that we have had so far is really strange in computer architecture, that we'll have to speak a language owned by a company. Now, RISC-V is actually giving you a language that you can speak for computing that is free and owned by the people who speak it. That you want to speak a free language that you can evolve, that you can modify, and not a language that is owned by someone else that will tell you what to say and how to say it.
I think you're seeing today lots of startups who can easily get hold of RISC-V and start using RISC-V. I like to say that RISC-V is the lingua franca of computer architecture now, computer architecture research. There's papers all over the world. The starting point is RISC-V, so everyone's speaking the same language, with lots of interesting research.
All computers run programs at the very lowest level. They need to have a common lingua franca. RISC-V is important because if there is a lingua franca, then we can start building standard computers. The key message is that computers are getting themselves embedded into every aspect of our life. And for that, you need computers that are open so that people can standardize on something. And RISC-V with its open ISA is the only option that is available if computing is to become all pervasive. You can't build a society on proprietary foundations.
RISC-V is the Linux of the processor architecture world. It's the transformation to an open source platform that allows many, many more innovators and inventors to contribute to the advance of the technology.
It's open ISA standard. It's highly flexible, it's highly modular, it's highly minimal when you need it.
I'd say it's a very modern instruction set. It's clean, it's easy to implement, it's extensible.
It takes a very different business model approach. We are an open instruction set. It is free to use. You overcome massive challenges in barriers to entry.
The key differentiator for RISC-V from other processors is the openness, the fact that you don't need to sign any agreement whatsoever to just start using it. Even a free ARM core, you have to sign a legal agreement to start using it. With this, you can just download it. You don't have to ask anyone's permission. You just start using it straight away. And that is a fantastic difference.
So if you have a great idea for a product, you can use RISC-V, you can extend it, you can do whatever you want with it, and you're really only bound by how capable you are and how big your imagination is.
If you were to say, look at the landscape of instruction sets or clusters of places where people are investing around architecture, it's right up there. Of course, you have x86, you've got ARM. RISC-V is definitely in that small conversation.
RISC-V is already a very significant architecture. We are using it in a commercial setting. It's for us, it's something that we would be in some kind of trouble if we had to live without it. For us, it's already very significant, and I think there's a lot of companies for which it's a very significant architecture.
Nobody in computer architecture and in the hardware industry can today afford to ignore what RISC-V is. With RISC-V, really, even research on topics that I believed to be completely dead is being reignited, because now you have the freedom to experiment, to try, to compare, to do fair comparison, benchmarking, and so this is like a renaissance.
I'm just very amazed and impressed at what has happened. I couldn't have imagined this. There have been attempts before at open source architectures, but it's the kind of thing where you need expertise in architecture, in operating systems, in hardware design, in compilers, the whole good. And there are very few places in the world where all of those sit under the same roof, Berkeley being one of them. Collusion of expertise like that. The idea that you could get, even in those early days when I first started getting into the fact that it already had GCC running on it, and I could very quickly boot Linux on it. I think these are the things that just change people's minds right away, that it's safe to go this way.
The key feature is ability to understand your own designs. Ability to own a design fully, not have any black boxes, have an ability to modify anything that the way you want. It has become I'm not going to say as big as Linux, but it's kind of headed there. And it's going to be very difficult to go back.
Today, RISC-V is a movement that can no longer be stopped. I think actually 2019 was the breakout year. And we could see it at SiFive, but just broadly. The conversation started to change to why not use RISC-V as opposed to the early years where it was like, why the hell would I use something other than what I've always been using?
You know, all of the major security conferences start having slots where we get presentations, papers on RISC-V related topics. So RISC-V and security is definitely a topic that momentum is growing on it. There is a first dedicated conference called RISC-V coming up in August. It's really, everybody wants to try it out because it's now available and open to everyone, including academia all over the world. People can try it out. So they can try concepts, they can, publish papers on it, they can find out new ideas on how to make things more secure compared to other maybe more proprietary designs where there's more problems, but you can't do anything about it because they're proprietary.
From an architecture innovation perspective and a chip design innovation perspective, RISC-V is everywhere. I'd say it's the go-to research architecture today. Today, right, 2020, now that I'm doing architecture, I use RISC-V and I get so many things for free. I can focus on adding value on a few instructions and leverage tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in RISC-V over the last 10 years with all the companies. You go that much further by being able to leverage that infrastructure.
It's becoming a first choice in some area in the world. There's no other better options than this.
Every day is an interesting day at RISC-V. Just today, I got to help promote an online training course that has taken 8 months to put together, but is a 5-day workshop going on in India. When we look at what's going on in Europe, I mean, it's profound. The European Processor Initiative is directing its funded projects to use RISC-V. That's absolutely amazing. And to see RISC-V embarking on high performance computing is tremendous. One of the biggest surprises to me was also all the activity going on in APAC, especially in China, where we have 4 different organizations that are focused on a variety of things, from industry adoption to long-term research to present day, how we're teaching in academia. Every day seems to bring a new surprise.
In a 5-year time frame, all the new applications will be completely dominated by RISC-V.
RISC-V in the first 5 years is kind of exceeded expectations all along. I mean, I think it's going to deliver on all the promises and lower the cost of processing and ultimately lower the cost of innovation.
Linux used to be, let's say, not well liked in Redmond, but Linux has been adopted actually by Azure and so on. So I think RISC-V is looking at that kind of future, that it could be so influential that it forces actually the incumbent players with large franchises to adopt and deal with it in some form. So beyond competition, it's likely to be a part of their futures as well.
I think a lot of the emerging applications which need a lot of interesting compute are the obvious choices. If you ask me today, it's going to be 5G, IoT, and AI are the ones that are going to use a lot of RISC-V.
I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic of the potential for our industry going forward when we look at the scale of what we can do with things like RISC-V, because we can develop in this open source world in an unconstrained environment. And then we can do the hardware-software combination. That is what I think will be the most meaningful reinvention of our industry and data center architectures in the future.
There are thousands of companies that are registering new businesses every day, and many of them are taking a RISC-V approach. I think we're going to see a lot of those startups start to really hold on to markets that are just starting now. We are putting compute capability in so many places that there is so much opportunity and so much room to grow. I also think that you're going to see the large multinationals that today have a toe in the water or a foot in the water that are using RISC-V as microcontrollers or as other pieces of their solution start to really gain faith and traction with those solutions and start to strategically plan their futures with RISC-V.
I think in another 5 years, it will have grown to something so significant, people will think that It's really been there forever almost.
There is an immense opportunity for RISC-V to be in 5 years the leading ISA for computing. So my vision and hope is that in 5 years from now, we'll be talking about the other instruction sets. The leading instruction set will be RISC-V. I mean, it seems to be incredible, but doesn't look so impossible now.
RISC-V is going to be the mainstream of the IC industry.
The release of the RISC-V ISA is really at the forefront of enabling this new innovation frontier that is really going to lead to, I believe, to a whole series of different ecosystems and adoption models around open source hardware in general and how the community collaborates on that.
I mean, I'm actually quite impressed. I think the kind of energy that is going into it and the way you have brought so many parties together is absolutely marvelous.
I think of ARM as a company that has paved the way for RISC-V. It is always destined to act as a place filler in the history of computing as a precursor to RISC-V.
That's the technology for microprocessor in the next decade, period.